Welcome to Bullets and Brass. So this is the first episode for this channel, and it's only fitting that we talk about what everybody should learn first when referring to guns and other firearms of any kind. And there are other kinds of firearms than just guns. These are the four principal rules that govern safety with anything in this whole category. It kind of applies to any projectile weapon. So even archery, slings are a little different because they require you to actually operate them, but a slingshot, you can kind of adapt these to a whole lot of things. Now, I'm just going to lay them out simply. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of depth. This is actually the second time I shot this video because the first one ran a little long, shall we say. So, number one is they're always loaded. Even when you just watch somebody unload it, check for yourself. If somebody else is messing around with the one, treat it like it's loaded. You never know. Unless you personally just cleared it and nobody else has messed with it, you don't know. This is just, if you treat them all like they're loaded, when everything else goes wrong, you're probably still going to be okay. Don't point it at anything. Number two, don't point it at anything you don't want to shoot. Now, people phrase this as destroy, kill, whatever. But really, it's if you don't want to shoot it, don't point the gun at it. Now, obviously, the gun has to point somewhere. It's physically impossible. I mean, like this one is pointing to the other side of my room. And they have to point somewhere. Be conscious of where they're pointed. Are they pointed at a person? Are they pointed at an animal that you don't intend to shoot? Are they pointed at a priceless piece of art? Are they pointed in some direction where you don't know where the bullet is going to wind up? Know where the bullet is going to go. It applies even pointed up. It is generally safer to aim a firearm down. Not always, but think about it. Be aware of where you're pointing it. Number three, and this is really, if you do this one right, if you do the second one and the third one correctly, it's really hard to have a problem. Keep your freaking finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. It doesn't mean not on the trigger, but in the trigger guard no. Keep your finger up off the trigger, on the frame, straight out, down below it, off the trigger. Preferably somehow so that if you clench your hand, you can't pull the trigger. Because if you don't pull the trigger, the gun doesn't go off. Modern firearms and even most historical firearms are incredibly tough to make go bang if you don't pull the trigger. Even on guns that don't appear to have a safety, they do. 9 times out of 10, there's a safety built in that if you don't pull the trigger, it can't actually go bang. So the last rule, and this one really applies to after you're shooting. You've decided to actually shoot. Be sure of your target and what's behind it. Know what the heck you're shooting. We live in an age where a lot of people don't hunt and don't live in areas where hunter safety is taught commonly in schools and growing up. But this goes back to when hunters always wore blaze orange, and it was very common, and it still is, unfortunately, sadly, too common, where people got shot hunting because somebody thought they were a deer, because they were dressed up in camo and they couldn't see the other person, or they were wearing brown because, brown field jackets are kind of common and have been for I don't know, probably since the dawn of time when people were skinning deer and wearing that as clothing. So be sure of your target. Identify your target. Don't guess. Be sure, because you're about to put a hole in it. Bad things happen when you put holes in things. And secondly, know what's behind it. Not just right behind it, but what if you miss? If you miss your shot, where is the bullet going? Know that. Know what happens if you miss. Know where that bullet can go after it goes through the target. Very often you'll see ranges that are angled downward a little bit, because that way if somebody misses, it still hits the ground. It's still, if they're angled down a little bit and then there's a berm, well, you got to miss a lot to miss that entirely. And it's just for safety. It's just to make sure that you know where that bullet is going afterward. So that is it. That is the 4 rules of gun safety. If you don't follow them, you may luck out and not get hurt and not hurt anybody else. But if you do follow them, even when things go wrong, the odds are good that they won't go completely wrong. These are basics that are almost universal, country to country, culture to culture. There are very few areas of this planet that don't follow these rules in some form or another when it comes to guns. Even places where we question whether they're civilized. When an adult is teaching a child about gun safety, these are the general rules. People phrase them differently. They may put them in a different order. They may add a rule. They may leave one out somehow. These are the main rules. And really, every time you see an accident with a firearm, you see some tragedy where somebody got shot and they say it was an accident, very rarely is it an accident. What it is negligence. Somebody screwed up and didn't follow the rules. So anyway, that is the 4 rules of gun safety. Please follow them. Please be aware that when I'm making these videos, I am following them. Even if it doesn't look like I am, I am. I've either checked it beforehand and there's nobody else here, so I know it's not loaded, or if it looks like I'm pointing it in the wrong place. Cameras are good at illusions. So, and obviously, if I put my finger on the trigger, I'm aware of what I'm doing. Very often you have to fire a gun in terms of pulling the trigger in order to make it do something else that you want to demonstrate. So when I do that, I am being careful about it. But that is it. Take care, have fun, stay safe all.